Welcome to this week's edition of Inter-University Debate. Inter-University Debate is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV. I'm your moderator. My name is Lakay Gender Fancy. I'm an advocate, a lecturer, and a tax consultant. On this week's edition, we are hosting Kampala International University. Kampala International University students, you're welcome to the talk show.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are discussing the future of the East African Federation. 23 years after signing the treaty that brought in place the East African community, we look back as far as history and we discuss the future of the East African Federation. We'll look at the historical background, looking at the failed attempts to have the East African Federation. We'll look back here and look at the coming into the treaty in 1999 and coming into force of the same in 2000. We'll look at issues of the new entrants into the East African community. We haven't had any country exit the East African community, but we have had new entrants. What is attracting the new entrants into the EAC, and what is attracting the old members to stay within the EAC? We look at other issues of trade wars, issues of elections. We just got back from elections in Kenya. Does the other East African community countries have anything to learn from the elections that took place in Kenya? We look at issues of conflicts within the region. Does the EAC play any role when it comes to conflict resolution within the East African region? We'll go into issues of common market. How do we achieve a common market within the EAC? You go into several other issues, the strength of the EAC organ, and so forth. So before delving into the discussion, let me introduce our panelists for today. Like I mentioned, they are students of Kampala International University. Let me start with the gentleman that is seated right next to me. He is our first panelist for today, and his name is Jonathan Areeba. He is the Public Relations Officer Debate Club at Kampala International University, and he's pursuing Bachelor of Laws. Jonathan, you're welcome.
Thank you, Fancy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We are happy to have you. So our second panelist for today's inter-university debate is Miss Nalwadda Tracy. I hope I pronounced it well this time.
Yes, you did.
So Miss Nalwadda Tracy, she is pursuing a Bachelor of Laws degree from Kampala International University. So Tracy, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, our third panelist for today is Mr. Twine Davis. Davis is also pursuing Bachelor of Laws. So today we literally have a panel of law students. So Twine is also pursuing a Bachelor of Laws degree from Kampala International University. Davis, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
Okay, thank you. We are happy to have you for the talk show. So our fourth panelist is Miss Nabukwasi Tracy. Rebecca. That pronunciation of the first name as well. Nabukwasi Rebecca. She's pursuing Bachelor of Laws still from Kampala International University. Rebecca, you're welcome.
Thank you, Gender Fancy.
Okay, so our panelists, as introduced earlier, we are discussing the future of the East African Federation. As we know, this is something that is being talked about a lot right now, especially due to Somalia showing interest to join the EAC bloc. So before we delve into the deeper discussion of this topic, let me start from Jonathan giving us an historical background to the East African Federation.
Thank you, Fancy. Now you've just made my job easy because I will not be discussing the laws. These better lawyers will be discussing the laws.
Thank you.
Anyway, it is prudent for me to first describe what the East African community and probably the East African Federation are. And the East African community is the regional bloc of the geographic East Africa states, member states. For example, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, Democratic Republic of Congo, much recently South Sudan, and like you said, Somalia is planning to join. But then the East African Federation is the proposed regional government of these member states. Now, having stated that, to trace back to when does the East African community, the idea of having the East African community come about, you go as far as 1971 and talk about the East African, the custom unions between Uganda and Kenya that later Tanganyika, the currently Tanzania, joined them in 1927. Then from there you go to the East African High Commissions. Then then from there you go to the East African Commission Services Organization, and then there comes the first East African Community, which then fell in 1967. No, it was in 1967 and then fell in 1977. Then when it fell, for reasons it collapsed, then when it collapsed, we went into the East African Corporation until 1999. So the East African Corporation until 1999 is sort of what introduced the current day East African community. And you will realize that the East African community then came into force in 2000. Having said that, gender is, the East African community has had its achievements, like we will be discussing, but most importantly, which we should not miss to discuss, is that it has at least set pace for the East African Community Regional Bloc to discuss with other regions, for example, the COMESA and SADC. And I think then I will give it back to you, Gender. From there.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Before I bring Tracy into the discussion, let me just ask you something on the historical background. So as you mentioned, we had a failed ESC in history, and now we have a current one. What do you think brought about the failure of the ESC in the past?
One, the failure of the East African community in the past was a lot of things, and but first and foremost was the conflicts between the member states, the conflicts between the main parties then was Kenya and Uganda. Then Tanganyika was not so much into the reason as to why it failed. So, but the conflicts amongst them caused the failure, and the lack it had been built on a background that was not so strong that could hold it. Like I've showed you that throughout history we have had commissions, East African Organization, custom unions, and all these have not had a sort of a force in the background that should hold them together, like a common goal, which the East African community today has. Maybe I didn't mention that the East African community today has shared goals, for example, economic prosperity, security, political stability, and actually one of those goals is to realize the East African Federation. Now, the East African community of 1967, which fell in 1977, did not have these goals in common. These states did not share so many goals like these, and therefore they did not chase one goal, and for that they had to fall.
Okay, let me move to Tracy. So Tracy, now we are having the current ESC that when we trace back to Jonathan's historical background, it came in 1999. So what is the legal backing of the ESC?
Thank you very much. So the legal backing of the ESC is basically a treaty that was signed in 1999 after the fall of the ESC in 1977. Then we come to 1999. And in 1999, a treaty was signed that basically brought into force the current East African community. And it is that treaty that provides for entries into the East African community. It is that treaty that provides for the different organs, the summits, the judiciary, how they're going to be put in place. It's that same treaty that provides for how the East African community is going to realize all its set objectives and goals. So it came into force, or it was actually executed in 2000, in 2000, around July. Also, there's a East African Community Customs Management Act that was signed, or that came into force when the member states joined. So this Customs Management Act is meant to foster trade. Now, we all know part of the objectives of the East African community is to foster trade, to make sure there is free movement of labor and goods throughout the community or throughout the different states. So this treaty is one of those treaties that make way or make it easy for such things to come into place. So because of this, we realize that now there's an East African community.
Okay, thank you for that, Tracy. Let me move to Davis. So Davis, we have seen Jonathan differentiated between the federation, which it says is a proposed political union, and then the EAC that we have right now. So I'll just ask you two questions in one. Why a federation? And then what is the rationale for the formation of the East African community?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Fancy. To appreciate still, since Jonathan had already introduced to us the clear background of the East African community and how it started, and the set roles, what they were aiming at, and some of the failures that came out, and why the East African community could not surface it at the first time, and why now the federation or the need of the federation. I want to first believe that since we are taking the line of looking at the East African Federation, that still the federation would also look at fronting the same objectives that at first the East African community had at first from when it was formed in the late 1967. Nalwadda Tracy also had also introduced to us the issue of the treaties and how these different countries come in. And so to maybe straightly go onto the question you directly asking, the rationale of the East African community and what would be the aims. I want to firstly identify that the different countries, especially Uganda, where we have Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and then the entry of Southern Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo, that one firstly as an umbrella, the East African community, which now could be a proposal of the East African Federation, would aim at making sure that they constitute or implement or front ideas that help with the umbrella, which is the East African Federation, which one of the guiding objectives would be maybe to promote trade, where it is rationally understood that if we're to protect the trades within the East African community, then it aims at developing the federation or developing the different countries, without forgetting that these different countries have different economies. So if it is the federation, it would at least look at making sure that these other different countries that have not grown on a drastic move like with the other neighboring countries, because we believe that the economy and the development in Kenya may not be the same in Uganda. Yeah, and we have also had different because you know, for example, Uganda is landlocked in nature, that if we can have the relationship or understanding relations between Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania, then trade could be aiming at making sure that the East African countries that are under the umbrella of the East African community would develop. And if I'm not to take it as a future move, because I believe everything that is set within its own goals, say the East African community would aim at making sure that these East African countries develop politically, socially, economically, which is a move that anyone would really pray for. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Davis, for that. Before I bring Rebecca into the discussion, I would like to ask you a little more about the East African Federation and the community. So earlier you agreed with Jonathan that the East African Federation is a proposed political union of the East African countries, while the EAC is the East African community that we have right now. So why why the proposed federation? Why are we moving to a federation? Why do we want a federation?
Okay, yeah, thank you. We noted earlier that firstly, with the introduction of the East African community, as Jonathan had already narrated to us, that firstly, the East African community, when it failed in the late 1977, some of the set goals and objectives that were set were never achieved, firstly. And that just because, and what he had already identified, that most of the different countries had different conflicts, especially Kenya having conflicts with Uganda. So you understand that that umbrella failed at that point, and then this brings us to the rationale or the reason behind why the federation. And to note still is that we should never forget that the federation, as now a political, as now an umbrella move, aims at making sure that the objectives that were never achieved and the East African community first from its initiation can now be achieved. So since this is an umbrella that every East African community countries all over can embrace, then the federation is now at least coming in to seek to at least find solutions to bide what are the problems that are facing these different countries in East Africa that are under the East African community. What are the problems and what are the different amicable solutions that can be given or can be provided to make sure that the East African Federation can have set objectives that help to run the development of the East African countries. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let me move to Rebecca. So, Rebecca, we have had the East African community for 23 years now, 2022. And we have read the treaty that brings about its objectives and the different treaties signed in there. So far, 2022, what has been some of the achievements of the ESA?
Thank you so much. So far we have seen where the ESA has come from and how we have lasted with it. And so mostly of the treaties, when they signed the East African community, what was the main issue? The main issue was the customs unity. And what is with the customs unity, not so different from the COMESA, is trade. So the main issue that has been handled on and the achievement that we have had is trade and unity. So we have seen that trade is moving. There is free movement of trade in all the East African community, in all the East African countries that are, in all the East African countries, sorry. And so trade being the main issue, we see that it has been, and it is to a greater achievement, and also the free movement of people, like from different countries. Like it is very free for me to move to Rwanda, to Kenya, and to Tanzania without even a passport. So that is also to a greater achievement in the East African community.
Okay, let me move to Jonathan. So Jonathan, let's speak from trade.
Yeah.
The issue of trade, which Rebecca says it's a big achievement for the ESA. Now, there are issues that have come out. Issues of, number one, so many documents required by customs of these different countries for your goods to enter into their country. Starting with Uganda, so many documents that are required. Then we have also had issues of countries blocking goods from other countries within the ESA.
Yes.
You know, and then we have had issues of discrimination of products. So with all these issues within the ESA, how do we achieve the common market that the ESA hopes to achieve?
Yeah, thank you, Giandia. That's very tricky. How do we achieve? I think it's for the past, say, 100 years is what we've been trying to achieve. But then I will show you pointers, things that we have missed to do. So I think when you say that, for example, a lot of detail in terms of documentation that is required by Uganda itself, for example, in goods entering Uganda or exporting them. Well, you will have that documentation as long as you're taking goods throughout any country. You'll have that documentation. Now, while Davis was telling you about the East African Federation, what he was trying to emphasize was that if we have a political bloc of the East African Federation, then these regions can operate as states and we would have one country. If we have that one country, we would not want a lot of documentation to move from proposed quote and unquote state Kenya to state Uganda if they are falling under one political organization. So that would totally do away with the issue of documentation. But while we are still chasing the federation, how can we then answer questions of discrimination amongst products and you know, blocking other products to come into the country? Now, firstly, I would like to point out that in 2018, I stand to be corrected, in 2018, Kenya blocked maize, milk, and among what else, poultry from Uganda to Kenya. And the reasons of Kenya were firstly that, for example, the maize was low quality and the milk was low quality. But also...
And that the maize contains certain toxins.
Yes, certain toxics. But that also there was plenty of these products in Kenya. And when Ugandan products then are exported to Kenya, where does the Kenyan population that has maize sell its maize? Because the tricky thing is that actually Ugandan maize is cheaper than Kenyan, even when it is exported. And that has something to do with the laws, the law system of Kenya on how a farmer can actually come up to farm and plant maize. It is a little bit tricky. I don't want to get into that discussion. But to give you a pointer to elaborate this a little bit more, you realize that, for example, in Uganda, you might have your cows and you get cow dung and take it to your plantation. In Kenya, it's not that way. You actually have to get that dung and sell it to a person who processes fertilizer, and you buy fertilizer to put into your plantation. So it becomes more expensive to get crop products in Kenya. So when it becomes more expensive, then it means that the one who's producing maize in Uganda achieves that at a cheaper price and then can sell it at a cheaper price. So you have something like maize, Ugandan maize being very cheap in Kenya. So Kenya was trying to solve that. But, I don't want to appear as if I'm saying then it was right. I stand to say that that shouldn't have happened, because they should have looked for means, agreements to settle the price issue, to look for a way that Ugandan maize can go to Kenya and it would still be sold, or solve the issue of toxic maize or the intoxication, and which Uganda tried to solve. But also, now to directly address the issue of blocking goods from entering a country, then I hope you are trying to talk about Rwanda and Uganda when the Kigali border was blocked. Now, more than trade, the Kigali border was blocked because of political stance between the heads of state. It was sort of a power struggle, which I also think should not happen. And that happens because we have not reached at a point where I think heads of state and state members recognize themselves as equals or as partners. When we reach that level, then we can have a time to settle political political conflicts and not affect trade. For example, I think Parliament of Uganda and Parliament of Rwanda should have intervened with these matters and ensure that the borders were open, not leaving it to heads of state to decide when the borders should be opened and affecting trade. So if we have a federation, we can solve all the three problems. But like I told you, a federation might come much later. Therefore, in that instance, I think we should have a much more enforceable legal framework. Tracy discussed the legal framework, but it should much be enforceable. The treaty of the East African Community should come with sanctions, should you deviate from the provisions of the treaty, it should come with sanctions for a state. And therefore, if those sanctions happen, then states would comply with the requirements of the East African community. And if that happens, then we would solve all this trade fracas that is happening in the East African community. But I must also say that progressively, I hope that the East African community will devolve to that level.
Okay.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that. Let me bring Tracy back into that discussion. So, Tracy, we are talking about the issue of trade, basically
Yes.
trade wars within the region. So, still similar to what I asked Jonathan, how do we achieve a common market within the EAC with all the problems when it comes to trade within the EAC?
Thank you. So, firstly, I will agree with what Jonathan has just discussed, that we need treaties that are much more cautious and that have sanctions attached to them. Reason being, we have heads of state who do things simply because they can. So it's like there's no checks and balances within the East African community. And where there's no checks and balance, that means everyone can do what they want when they want to. So what the East African community needs in terms of trade is treaties that are intentional to solve the different problems. So where you have maize in Uganda being at a low price compared to the maize in Kenya, what treaties are there? What laws are there? If the East African community came up with policies, for example, where policies that can facilitate having values of different commodities and different products that are, they may not really be the same, but proportionate. You know, where you have a kilo of maize in Uganda being at, let's say, 2,000 or 3,000 or less, let Kenya be having a price that is, you know, moderately the same or slightly higher. You understand? Something that does not really show a bigger difference in the value. So also what comes into play when it comes to the trade is the fact that the East African Federation is looking at bringing in a currency that is a uniform currency for all the East African countries. That is the East African currency. So when we were coming, actually, I was discussing with a friend and we were talking about it. Now, the East African currency is meant to foster trade within the member states of the East African community. However, the other question that comes into play that I feel like the East African community has not yet addressed is the differences, the values. Already, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania share the same currency. We are all using shillings. But even with that in place, you find that the GDPs of these countries are different. You find that the values of the products of these countries are different. So the East African community still has a lot to do when it comes to the trade sector. It still has a lot of policies that are supposed to be intentional about solving the nitty-gritties of the trade union. Because so many problems are, you know, with merging, when you merge things, that means you're taking up the good and the bad. So you have to have a plan, or you must have something to be able to neutralize and balance up everything. So us achieving such a thing means we have to be intentional as the East African community, that sanctions are attached, policies are put into place to make sure that a farmer, a trader in Congo, in South Sudan, in Burundi, Rwanda, and in Uganda, we all not even seemingly, sort of have the same opportunities, the same value for our products, the same movement for our products throughout the borders. We're talking about the fact that Rebecca's talking about there being free movement. On my side, I would sort of deviate from that. There is seemingly free movement of labor and goods. However, a person still requires so much documentation at the borders. And then we still have member states of the African community having, you know, struggles and conflicts amongst themselves that they let affect their economies and they let affect their trade. So all those things have to be addressed for us to be able to achieve a better market, for us to be able to achieve a better East African community, and to be able to develop to what we anticipate.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. So let me move to Davis. So Davis, in your earlier discussion, you brought out the issue of the federation and seems to say there's a move to bring a federation in place to achieve certain things within the community. My question is, when you look at the current status of the East African community and the different states, do you think we will one day see a federation?
As a charismatic and energetic African, I want to believe that the futuristic move of seeing a federation can be real. One
president, one parliament, army.
As I earlier said, I think that can be, to my own perspective, that is something that at least I would want to pray for. Firstly, though not forgetting that these different countries in East Africa have their own economical, social and political indifferences. That firstly, the politics and the economy in Uganda may not be the same as that in Kenya, as I had earlier noted. To not still something like to see a federation, I think is something that I as a Ugandan would want to see. And I think that would at least achieve most of the things that we've not achieved as different member states. Because at the end of it all, we should not forget that the main aims of the East African community, which now can be vast into the objectives and the aims of the East African Federation. One would work for the main aim and the betterness or the goodness of the East African development of the East African community countries. That firstly, we do not have to take an independent side and see Uganda as an independent country, see Kenya as an independent country, and Tanzania, Somalia, and that's all. Because remember, if the East African Federation is to succeed, then it should look at the aims and objectives and the development of these different countries. That one country would come out to help another country to develop. That it is not sidelined at looking at the development of one independent country, that also the other countries can also develop. Yeah, so to move it on straightly is that I see a future, if I'm not too futuristic.
Okay.
Yeah, but I see it open.
Okay, so Tracy wants to add something.
Yeah, me, I would like to deviate from what he's saying. A federation of the East African countries, which are currently 7, is far from being achievable for reasons. One, the fact that we have a lot of diversities and culture. Okay, let me first put that on a standstill. The strongest point is the fact that the 7 states have 3 dictators, 3 presidents that have been in power for so long. I will not mention them. But the question, no, but the question then comes into play: will those dictators be willing to forfeit their power to one president? I want you to imagine South Sudan, that has just recently got its independence, saying, you know what, it is okay, let us be under one president. That's, even just thinking about it, it can't happen. We know South Sudanese for being aggressive. So I don't know how you can tell a South Sudanese that now, as South Sudan, you've just fought being independent. You just fought to be independent from Sudan. Now you have to be subject to a president of the East African community. That is something. Now, that aside, the fact that we have diversities in cultures, it is going to be, in my opinion, it would be hard for, I would say, like the Burundian president. Let's say he becomes a president of the East African community. So he will then have to lead cultures in Uganda. He'll have to lead cultures in South Sudan, DRC, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, all together. And this, like, he is not familiar with these people. He is not familiar with how how hostile can they be? Or how peaceful can they be? He is not familiar with their needs and their wants. He does not know these people. We all know from history that when you have colonies that are too big, it becomes harder to rule them. That's why we've seen great leaders like the Napoleons and the Metternich fail. Because at the end of the day, their territories became too big for them to be able to handle. So I see that would easily happen with East Africa. And given the fact that most of the leaders that come up in Africa are less patriotic, okay, in the beginning, they all seem to be patriotic and all. But eventually, when they get into power, they tend to lose track. They tend to lose it. And they get so dissolved into other things that then come up there. So it then becomes hard for that one leader to be able to address all the issues of all the 7 states, for us to be able to realize an East African community that is going to stand for 10 years, for 20 years. So it is my submission that even if it happens, it is going to be for a short period.
So you see a failure if it happens?
Yes.
Okay. So I see Rebecca wants to add something to that.
Yeah, I want to add something with Tracy, though she was talking about the political side of view. And then me, I looked at the other side of us being colonized by different colonies. Like, for example, Uganda and Kenya, we are under British. And then there is Congo that is under France and, is it German or Belgium? And then there is Rwanda, France. So when we are talking about a federation, well, countries have different views. Like, for example, if you want to come up with one constitution, and Congolese don't know anything about how how Ugandans and how we are taught by under the British. So it's totally going to be a different thing. Or maybe we have to go back to the roots and then start teaching them how everything is going to work. Now, let's say Congolese want to, people from Congo want to make France or French, to make French the language, the official language. And now here we are in East African community saying, let Kiswahili be the official language. So we are going to be having a lot of differences that we have to work on. And also the GDP, and because now the countries that are joining East Africa are all struggling countries. Look at Somalia that wants to join. Look at Sudan that my friend Tracy was like, it has just come from independence. So basically they are just starting. And then look at Congo. Till now they are still under civil wars. So working on their economic, like us, East Africans, we are also struggling with our own problems. For example, we are talking about trade conflicts. And then we also come up and then we are like, we have to support our people so that we come under one president who is going to be ruling all over East Africa. So that basically is going to be a very big problem. Or maybe if we are going to go back and then start from the beginning, which is going to also be hard, or maybe might lead to a fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's leave the issue of the federation aside now and look at what Rebecca just started, the new entrance. Somalia wants to join the East African community. Congo joined. South Sudan joined. Ever since the EAC started, we have been seeing new entrants coming in, none exiting. So let me start with Jonathan, since Jonathan was quiet on the issue of the federation discussion. So Jonathan, what is attracting the new entrants?
I think the possibility of what the East African community can achieve is what is attracting the new entrants. But also to look at let me give perspective here, to look at the new entrants in perspective, we have DRC Congo, we have South Sudan, and we have Somalia. What they have in common is that these 3 countries have been at war. And in these countries being at war, specifically Kenya and Uganda have had their soldiers through the different affiliations, AMISOM, then the military of Uganda directly intervening with this war, and the Kenyan military. and actually promoting peace in these countries. So if I'm going to play my cards, I think that one of the most convenient reasons for these countries to join the East African community is the hope for political and security stability in the East African community, since the member states have already played a big role to ensure that that happens in their countries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Let me move to Tracy then. So Tracy, let's pick out Somalia. Since Somalia hasn't yet joined, but it has shown interest to join. Recently, the summit, which brings together presidents of all the countries within the East African community, sat and decided to fast track the application of Somalia. That means Somalia, anytime,
He's joining.
is joining the East African community. We might have it as part of the East African community. We already had South Sudan joining and Congo. So what does it mean for the East African community when these states with so many wars join the EAC?
Thank you so much. So in my perspective, it is going to be more burdensome than it's going to be beneficial. Because if you're to look at it, the current members of the East African community have nothing to lose if these countries do not join. So whether they join or not, East African communities are losing nothing. However, they have a lot to gain from joining the East African community. But then what comes into play is what Rebecca is trying to say, that then the current members of the East African community are going to have at a certain point try to divert funds to make sure that these states that have been affected by wars, have their economies revived in a way or two. You have to support them in a military way, in a financial way. Somewhat, policies have to be put up to be able to help out these other states. So that comes at a cost. You get, it is already evident in Uganda we are hosting so many refugees because of the wars that are happening. Already that is affecting our economy in a way or two. And then on top of that, us having a country like Somalia join, we also now have to go the extra mile, because when they start to settle and then develop their economy to try to get back on their feet, if they are part of the East African community is bound to help them. They are bound to divert of funds somewhat to help out those economies. So in my opinion, it is going to be more burdensome. However, if you're to look at the positive side of it, you could look at the different resources that could be in Somalia and the fact that there'll be a bigger market. Somalia is also got a port. I need to be corrected. I'm forgetting my map, but you can look at the other perspective of there's a population that can be reached out, and there's trade that can be carried out. However, if I'm to weigh it, there's more bad than good. So there still needs to be a lot of research and a lot of discussion that has to be carried out for whether they should join or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right from this moment, we are going to take a short break and then come back with the same discussion on the future of the East African Federation.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that break. We are still having students of Kampala International University, and they are discussing the future of the East African Federation. So as we continue, let me get back to Tracy. So Tracy, you said for us to admit Somalia into the EAC, there are more burdens than benefits. Did I quote you right?
Yes, indeed.
Exactly. So that makes me ask you a direct question. The EAC summit decided to fast track the application of Somalia. So do you think it's an application that as EAC we should consider? Should we outlook the issues of conflicts and consider the Somalia's application, or you think this is an application that we should not consider and proceed with the 7 states?
I think it's an application we shouldn't consider. Now, I know my fellow panelists may attack me on that, but I think it is something we shouldn't consider. Reason being, we are already, as the East African community, we already have to make sure that we balance up our economies. And we already have countries like Congo and South Sudan that are still getting over the effects that they've had from the wars they've been a part of. So as the East African community, we still have to make sure that these other states also get on their feet and have, to achieve economies or achieve an East African community where the standards of living in all these different states is good enough, where there's employment, life is better. So when we then take on a burden of Somalia, I think we are biting more than we can chew. Because despite the fact that, we're doing sort of well, we are not yet that strong as individual states to be able to carry on such huge burdens. When you do the research, Kenya is one of the richest amongst the East African communities. But so when you study the other states, they're just, struggling to come up. And even Kenya, that is the richest, still also has a long way to go. Recently, the president said we are moving to middle income. I don't know how true that is.
He actually said we are.
We are middle.
We are in the middle income. Yes,
but
and
yet
he kept going forth and back with World Bank that says no, Uganda is not a middle income state.
I think the World Bank is right, because we are not yet there. So if Uganda is still struggling to get to middle income state, and it is part of the EAC, and Burundi is having a very bad GDP, and then now we want to bring on Somalia, like there's a whole lot of things we still have to solve indoor, and now we want to add on something else. How about we first solve what is there right now as the East African community, before we can then start saying, let us bring on Somalia.
Okay. Yeah. So, Davis, let me bring you into that discussion on Somalia's fate in joining the EAC. Somalia says, you guys, you know what, look, we come with a lot of opportunities. We have been involved in trade in your countries. When you look at Uganda specifically, we see so many supermarkets being run by Somalis. You look at petrol stations by Somalis, So they are saying we have an economic tie with your states. And then on top of that, we have a history with the EAC. So do you think Somalia's application is one that EAC should accept?
Yeah, thank you so much. As Alia said, I think I would want to take a different side from what Tracy is talking about. Because firstly, I think Tracy is taking it on the economic arena, and she's looking at where these different countries are likely to take up the burdens of, say, Somalia, and then hinge them on the burdens already existing, say, with Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. So she takes an economic move, and where she's looking at all those burdens. Firstly, I want to say that we should not do away with the fact that first of all, we are Africans, and whatever acts or whatever moves are made within the East African community with different countries is for the benefit of African countries, especially the East African community countries. So Somalia is one that has gotten good relationships, if we to come to the issue of trade, as you had earlier said, where they own some supermarkets around, have gotten different relationships, even way back in history, where they were evidenced even with the construction of the East African Railway.
Yeah.
They all evidenced that.
Yes,
so
they actually say, since they were horse riders, they participated in marking the roads, and then the Indian coolies just came and, you know, built the East African Railway.
Yeah, true. So meaning that totally shows that even when they have conflicts right at home, we have a close relationship with them. That Somalia has at least some good relationship together with East African countries that have been existing. I find it so disappointing, especially when most of the African leaders wait to be called to UN summits, to United Nations summits, international bodies, to talk about their problems. So me, I wanted to take it on the political arena because I understand that inviting Somalia would come with at least some good benefits. That first of all, notwithstanding the fact that we know that Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania have their own economies set, and which also have with different challenges, as Tracy had already identified on the issue of Uganda. But firstly, if we to bring Somalia into the affair of joining the Federation or the East African community, you'll find it beneficial. That firstly, that first of all, we have for over decades been having fights over seeing Somalia fight. And what is always disappointing is that we see these African countries' citizens fight for each other, fight one another, which is really doesn't bring out sense. Because I find it challenging where, for example, you remember the recent fights that were in Southern Sudan, where Southern Sudan wanted to be independent. So there is a fight that is after independence, if the fight to get independence, and the fight after independence. So you understand that that is totally a fight that even up to now we are supposed to find solutions. Because if we've had Uganda is one of the member states that are under the AMISOM, the African Mission in Somalia, where it sends most of the soldiers to go fight and, for example, make sure that peace is maintained in Somalia. Yeah, so where I find it so beneficial that whatever happens within the East African Federation countries, the East African community countries, for the benefit, as I earlier said, for the benefit of those countries that are within the same umbrella. That if we could have Somalia get into it, then the first of all is that we first solve the problems that are affecting Somalia. That we don't wait to intervene, to have other international bodies or other external bodies to come and talk about solving the problems that are affecting Somalia and the different states like the Democratic Republic of Congo. That these problems are first solved at an internal level, that, for example, we can know what is affecting Somalia. Which solutions can we provide? Is it about enhancing more of the military to make sure that the peace is more protected, the peace is more maintained in Somalia, that the citizens can find peace? And then if that is maintained, because it comes with future burdens, it comes with future risks. The economies have it in say that if you don't take a risk, then you can never find a profit. So the profits or the risk is worth taking. I find that the risk of having Somalia, even with different challenges or with the conflicts that they have been having, the risk is worth taking. That we can at least that we should have Somalia get into to join the East African community, the East African Federation, so that we can have at least a move on solving which problems have been affecting Somalia and find solutions for the benefit of the same umbrella, the East African Federation. Yeah.
Okay, let me move to Rebecca. So Rebecca, moving away from the issue of the new entrants, but also not so far away, we see a contention on the issues of conflicts. It is making some members of ESC, including Tracy, scared of having Somalia join the ESC bloc. But we have had conflicts in Uganda as well. When you look at the issue of the LRA in northern Uganda from 1986 up to about 2006. And then, yeah, we are seeing Congo, South Sudan, and then Somalia that also has wars. Now, my question is, what role does the ESC as the East African community play when it comes to conflict resolution within its member states?
Okay, thank you so much. So, the fact that we are Africans, conflicts will always be there. Because conflicts are there in South Africa, however united they are. Conflicts are there in Western Africa.
Not just Africa, there are conflicts in Ukraine.
The rest of the world.
Yeah,
but the problem is, for us Africans, they are within us. Okay, with the rest of the world, maybe it's maybe regional or what. But Africans, Ugandans now, for example, you gave us an example of NRA. It's with our fellow Ugandans, the ones in Karamoja of recent. It's against us. So even the ones in DR Congo, their fellow East African. Okay, they joined us now. So they are also under conflicts between. They were also under conflicts between Rwanda and Uganda, saying Uganda wants to steal their gold. That's why they are joining. You know. So the only thing we have to work on is the East African community is working on is to promote unity. Because if there is no unity, we will always be conflicting each other. If they try to show Congo that no, this is a good idea, like being together is a good idea. We are benefiting, you guys are benefiting from us as we are benefiting from you. Now look at the fact that East Africa is the fifth, East African community is the fifth biggest like community in the whole world. So connecting from Atlantic to Indian Ocean. So that is very good. It promotes trade, it promotes. So the fact that we have to teach our fellow Africans or East African community is teaching that this is to a benefit, or this is to an advantage but not a disadvantage. The same with my friend Tracy, who was saying Somalia is full of conflicts and we cannot just welcome it just like that. We have to teach them that this is to a benefit. They shouldn't be scared of anything, but rather, you know, welcome the ideas and move on. With time, we shall catch up. The fact that sometimes we Africans fear ourselves, and then we are like, we are Africans, we are blacks, and we can't do anything. But we should leave that behind and, you know, understand that this is to a benefit. This is to an advantage, rather not a disadvantage. So that is basically it. Because it's the same thing that was in Congo when they were fighting with Rwanda and Uganda, saying we want to steal their gold. And yet there are a lot of Europeans.
They actually sued us.
And yet there
and they won.
And yet there are a lot of Europeans in Congo stealing their gold, actually. Their gold. And for us who wants to be, you know, showing them that your gold belongs to you, they are suing us. So that's the problem we have, we as blacks. We don't trust our fellow blacks, but rather trust actually the thieves. I'm sorry if I have offended anyone. But that's basically it. We have to teach our fellow communities that this thing is about unity and supporting ourselves, rather not give our products or our goods to be taken just like that.
Okay, before I bring Tracy in, I see Tracy wants to come in. Let me just get back with Rebecca still. So Rebecca, East African community being an intergovernmental organization, is there any substantial role that it plays within their member states when they are undergoing conflict?
Sorry.
I ask that question again. Okay, the East African community, as we know, it's an intergovernmental organization that brings together the 7 states, right? So is there any role it plays when within countries, when those countries are at conflict?
Yeah, there is, because we have seen examples of Ugandan army being in Congo, trying to settle conflicts and, you know, trying to be against the ADF. We have seen all the stories. We are seeing Ugandan army in Somalia. We are seeing like the community trying to protect what is theirs. So basically, yeah.
Okay. Was that the community going though, or the individual?
The individual, but in the community.
Okay, thank you. So let me have Tracy and then we get back to Jonathan.
Okay, thank you. So when she was talking about Congo having war with Uganda and Uganda got sued, it reminded me. So when we were having a discussion earlier, I'm sorry to take you back. When we were having a discussion even before we reached here about the trade among the different East African countries, it made me think of what's the way forward for the different East African countries. And it came to mind that if, as the East African community, we decided to focus on certain sectors in every different country. For example, we know that the western part of Congo has gold or has different minerals. And we decide that as the East African community, in order to foster trade, in order for us to develop, how about we set up industries? Or how about the industries are set up either in Congo or in the districts that are neighboring Congo in Uganda? We set up these industries that are mainly aimed at making end products out of that gold, that are then going to just get it from raw material to now something more substantial, and it can be exported or can be traded even within the very region. And then you have concentration maybe put in Uganda. Uganda has arable land. We are capable of producing very good food. We produce very nice fruits that are really juicy and sweet. How about we then start to package that? Like you have different countries bringing to the table something that they feel that can be given an incentive. And then we focus on industrializing it and just taking it from that level of raw material to now something bigger. And then we have industries in different countries. You could have an industry in Sudan, then maybe you have the ports in Kenya and Tanzania also given an incentive, and we find different policies and different things that we can put in place as the East African community to make sure that not just as individual countries, but as a region, we are developing and we are giving each other a hand as we do that.
Okay, thank you for that. So let me get to Jonathan. So Jonathan, before we brought in Tracy, we were having issues of conflicts within the East African countries.
Yes.
Now, I would like to ask something that I related to what I asked Rebecca. We are seeing individual countries going to solve conflicts.
Yes.
We have seen the president of Uganda playing a very instrumental role in South Sudan, as well as in Congo. So my question is, do you think the role that EAC plays when it comes to conflicts in its member states, I don't mean individual states, I mean as EAC, do you think it's enough when it comes to conflict resolution?
Enough? It's not enough, but let me first give background. You see, Fancy, of the 7 East African countries, at least each country borders with 3 countries in the East African community. And at least each one country borders with 1 country that is at conflict. Now, that means that at least for each country, there is a neighbor who is at conflict. And therefore, each country is playing a role, is having a problem with that neighbor and the conflict. Now, in as well as you point out that President Museveni has played a very substantial role to conciliate leaders in South Sudan and also settle matters in Congo, I would like also to point out that His Excellency President Emeritus Uhuru Kenyatta played a great role in settling the conflict between Uganda and Rwanda. So we've really had individuals playing roles to solve conflicts with their neighbors. And that's basically because at least each person has a neighbor who is at conflict. Now, to directly answer your question, is the East African community as a body, as a bloc, playing a role enough to solve the conflict? My answer is that it is barely playing any role to solve the conflict. You're familiar with the fact that we have the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda that sits in Arusha. But this International Criminal Tribunal submits to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. We also have the East African Court of Justice, which, in my own perspective, now that you have already talked about the case between Uganda and Congo, which Congo later won, and we have to pay something around 350 billion, which I think we have paid something like 250 recently. That case was before the International Court of Justice. Yeah. I believe that such a case should have been before the East African Court of Justice, because it is a matter that has happened in the East African community, and therefore jurisdiction and the logical point of view, the East African Court of Justice should have been in a better position to handle those matters. But you see, the East African Court of Justice, like we have earlier submitted, does not come with the threat of sanctions, and its decisions will not be respected by member states. And therefore, having that in your mind, then the East African community is barely playing any role as a bloc to solve the conflicts within itself, but it's only individuals.
Okay, thank you so much, Jonathan, for that. Let me prompt something more deeper when it comes to the East African Court of Justice. Because at the moment, when you look at the treaty that establishes it, it confines its jurisdiction to interpretation of the treaty. So are you saying we should widen its jurisdiction to be able to settle conflicts between member states, such as the one that was in Congo?
Yes, definitely. I think that the International Court of Justice should do way more than the East African Court of Justice, should do way more than interpreting the treaty of the East African community. It should hear cases, conflicts between states that occur. It should also establish a criminal bloc, or either the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda should affiliate to the East African Court of Justice, or it should have a criminal bloc that can handle criminal matters. And therefore, people like war criminals, conflict criminals that we take to the ICC, that we take to the ICTR, should not go there. They should go to the East African Court of Justice. And therefore, the EALA, the East African Legislative Assembly, has a lot to do within the defining the role of the East African Court of Justice to that extent.
Okay, let me bring Davis into the discussion right there. Davis, picking up from where Jonathan ended, the issue of widening the jurisdiction of the East African Court of Justice to try including matters at the ICC. Now, we have on one end African countries, you know, when the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, and the former vice president, now the president, William Ruto, were being tried before the ICC. Several African leaders, including our own president, Yoweri Museveni, came out and said they called out the ICC for trying a sitting president. And said they should respect the charter that established the African Union that says a sitting president shall not be tried. So we have on one end the African leaders calling out the ICC for trying, you know, a sitting president and a sitting vice president. Then on the other end, we have issues of impunity, setting up a court that might be controlled by these presidents, you know, making them probably do things that, and then not be tried before this court. So looking at all those factors and several other issues in there, do you think that the East African Court of Justice should widen its jurisdiction to try criminal matters and matters interstate?
I find it beneficial and advantageous in nature to enhance and let the East African Court of Justice enhance its jurisdiction. In that, firstly, the East African Court of Justice, first of all, even with its establishment, would first of all look at why it was established, and that means taking up the legal perspective. It means it aims at making sure there is a promotion of legal frameworks and legal moves for the benefit of the East African community. That I find it so beneficial that its jurisdiction should be enhanced. That the members and the problems that are affecting the East African community, the criminal and civil in nature, should be handled at an East African level. Firstly, I understand that there could be conflicts that would entertain an international move or international perspective to maybe handle it if it is against the human, if it is on the issue of promoting the human rights and promoting human rights at an international level, that maybe we can entertain maybe the International Court of Justice. But firstly, that would, if it is not in that line, then it means other conflicts, those civil or criminal in nature, it is so so beneficial that they can be handled at an internal level, where now the East African Court of Justice can take a move, other than intervening into having the International Court of Justice. Because firstly, you understand that the International Court of Justice would also come out with their own set agendas. That firstly, this is promoting more of a white supremacy. And that means what can be solved at an African level is not entertained, that these white dominated nations come with their own set obligations, their own conditions, to the extent that if you looked at the penalties, and they're having the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, summoned into the International Court of Justice.
Criminal Court. International Criminal Court.
Exactly, International Criminal Court. You find out that the fact that that is unjustifiable, because they're baseless. Because I understand that whatever transpires within the country, everyone is watching. That the country Kenya, what is doing, Uganda is also watching as well. That an umbrella, if it is to say the International Court of Justice, is looking at what is transpiring within the different countries. That whatever conflict that happens within those countries, the East African Court of Justice is watching. That means as a legal project, as a legal arena, it is looking at solving what is transpiring within those countries. So I find it so beneficial that its jurisdiction can be enhanced. Firstly, that we have these solutions, we have these problems solved at an East African level, than intervening the other internal bodies.
Okay, just one more question still to Davis, just because you brought that up. So, but on one end, we don't want other countries hearing about who is stealing from who, and then the issues of you talked about the supremacy of other states, but also there's issue of impunity. How would we deal with that if we let those issues be tried by the East African Court of Justice? Impunity from the heads of state.
Just
a moment. Like, for example, do you think the East African Court of Justice would have tried the post-election violence in Kenya in 2007, the case that the ICC tried Uhuru Kenyatta for?
That is possible. In that, first of all, if we have set up that such a block, it means such a block has set objectives. So if such an arena cannot be used to solve such problems, it means it is existing in air. It is non-existing. It is lacking out its own set of objectives, meaning it is existing, but it does not exist for the benefit of why it was set up. So I find it necessary that the East African Court of Justice would have come to intervene into that matter to solve it, other than the International Court of Justice. Yeah, because there we're looking at promoting what are the set objectives and roles of the East African Court of Justice. Yeah, because if it does not intervene where it need to be witnessed, then it means its set objectives are not enhanced, they are not promoted. So it is just existing, but with no set objectives and roles or aims. Yeah, so in that it still gets back to us that still these African countries, East African countries, and the East African Court of Justice looks at solving those problems firstly. Okay. And the issue of impunity, where you're talking about solutions that problems that are existing within the member states and the member state members. I know I earlier said that the bloc as the East African Federation or the East African Community would also aim at promoting unity. That whatever conflicts that are happening within the country, that these member states, these member countries with the different state members can sit at a round table and find solutions. Because that means that every country would have representatives, and that means every country is fully represented. Okay. That these members can sit on a round table and they understand what are the problems that are affecting these countries that are under the same bloc, and which solutions can be provided firstly to solve these problems. So if that is put on a round table, if that is understood, then the main aims, the main objectives, though they may sound to be futuristic in nature, then they can be better achieved.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Davis, for that. Let me move to Rebecca. Rebecca, so the last issue we are discussing today is the issues to do with elections. Now, let me start with, we just got back from Kenya, but my first question on the election issues is that, what is the governance trend in all these 7 East African countries? Governance trend. Or do you want to push that? Okay, then let's have that push to Jonathan then. So Jonathan, we have shifted to issues of governance and elections.
Yeah.
You want to start from the point of what is the governance trend in the 7 East African countries?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Fancy. The governance trend. The 7 East African countries are totally different when it comes to governance. And if you can give me the latitude, then I can go through them brief.
Yeah, please do.
I would start with Kenya, because I think Kenya is the leading example of democracy in the East African region. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying that it's a step ahead of the others. And I want to talk about Kenya and Tanzania in the same way, that they respect, for example, term limits and have presidents. They have had peaceful succession, and they have had presidents leave power and through an election that you can say is peaceful. Yes, in 2007, the Kenyan election had violence, and there was even that trial that you're talking about of the ICC. But then after that and before that, we have had peaceful elections in Kenya, equally in Tanzania. But the distinction in Tanzania and Kenya is that in Tanzania, we have had one political party ruling throughout. So as long as you affiliate to that, you will certainly be president. In Kenya, it's different. Actually, political parties come up in the time of elections. They are formed. There are more vehicles to the election aim. Now, from those two, I would come to Uganda, which has at least a consistent election every after 5 years.
Why are they always laughing though in comes to Uganda?
Yes, they are laughing because I've put it to the bare minimum. I've said at least an election. As far as whether it is fair and free, the courts of law have certainly said it's not, and have been reluctant to nullify that election as compared to the ruling of 2016 in Kenya. I think I stand to be corrected by Justice Maraga, Chief Justice. So at least Uganda has had the consistent elections, but it is way below the standard set by the first two countries, which have set democracy at a higher level. Here we have pre and post-election violence. We have, by the time we get to November, when the election is in January, people are dying on the streets. The opposition people, for example, Chizabesigya and Bobi Wine cannot hold rallies. They are blocked 10 miles. I was seeing a picture where Bobi Wine had to run for 10 miles from where he was blocked to where he had a rally. And it's I want to use the word gross. It's gross that you can see that happen and people still say that this election was free and fair. But Uganda is at least hopeful. When you talk about Rwanda, it's much worse. Although there is, although there is probably an election in Rwanda, it is a very unpredictable election in as far as when it will happen. It comes abruptly, you have the election, and it goes. So, but then when you consider, for example, South Sudan, I don't think South Sudan, we are yet to discuss an election. It's so from Kenya, then Uganda, then probably Rwanda and Burundi. I also want to juxtapose them at the same level. Then South Sudan is majorly an agreement that you take this office and I will take this office because I command this population and you command the other population, so we have both to gain. So it is still at a level that we cannot discuss whether they will have a peaceful election or not. As far as Congo is concerned, Congo has had a shift of presidents, but whether that has come in a democratic way is also subject to debate. We have had the Kabila family, a son toppling the father, and recently Tshisekedi is now in power. So you called it the trend of governance?
Yes, the governance trend.
The governance trend. So the governance trend in East African community is very low to some countries that are down, and at least the standard to those countries that are up has been set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was a good overview of the governance trend in the 7 members of the East African community. Mm-hmm. And one thing that Jonathan brought out was they are different. You know, the governance trend seems to be different. Recently, I was studying the budgets of all the 7 states. And when I reached South Sudan, I wanted to read their current budget. I couldn't find any. Then I found an article that their budget for the financial year that just ended was passed this year. For this year. Yeah. So yeah, just like he brought it. So let me now get back to Rebecca. So Rebecca, Jonathan says at least Kenya and Tanzania, we can say there is some sort of free and fair elections. That's how you put it? So what lesson do you think these East African countries have to learn from the election that just ended in Kenya?
So the first answer, or like other East African presidents could learn, actually not East African presidents, African presidents could learn from Kenya, that I love, is you can give up power peacefully and you can still live in the country very peacefully and protected and still have the office, you know, not the presidential office, but still be respected as the former president of the country. For example, I saw the budget for Kenyatta when he was leaving the office. It was very nice, like it was almost for a president's budget. So that is the first lesson we learn, that, you know, for example, our president, he can peacefully give up power and we can peacefully have another president and we can peacefully be moving on. And also the other thing in the election is we can still peacefully hold an election without being killed, without being blocked, without being a free election which has freedom of speech. You know, in Uganda, if you, I heard on the news, you know, these members when they say everyone who posted Bobby Wine is going to be arrested. Some of them were abducted. Some people were abducted, and till now we don't know where they are, or maybe they were killed or what. In town, it was worse. Everywhere it was worse in Uganda. So every time we have an election in Uganda, we are like, I think we are going to stop school. We should be careful of where our children are. We shouldn't be moving to town. We shouldn't be wearing any color which is not yellow, and also wearing yellow is also a problem. And when it comes to Rwanda, it's also the same thing. Totally very bad. So the lessons we learned is that Kenya gave us a dare. Kenya is like, it gave us a dare. Dare you do this and see where it goes. But then also we are seeing movements in Uganda that if the president resigns, we have the first son into power. So basically, it's like the inheritance thing, something that I hear in Rwanda. I'm not so sure. But then I loved Kenya's election because it was peaceful. And also, after the election, like in Uganda, you elect the president. By 7 p.m., we know who the president is. 7 p.m. after casting our votes, we know who our president is. So even if you sleep knowing this is the president, you wake up knowing, okay, the previous president is the president. So, but in Kenya, it took days when they were counting votes. It took days. And even after days, however much they said this one won, they went to court, so as to further look into how the votes went and who won. So that it took like a week, it took weeks to finally find out who the president of Kenya was, which is not in Uganda. By 7 p.m. we know who the president is. By next week, we are just going to wait. Okay, by next week, they have started abducting some people who were supporting the president. They are lost, some are killed, others are in hospitals, nursing wards of bullet wounds. So the lesson we learn is we can still have a peaceful election. You can still leave the throne peacefully without war, without abducting people. And you can still be communicating with your people, and you can still be respected as the former president of the country.
Okay, thank you so much, Rebecca, for that. So we are now going to have our concluding remarks. And I'll start with Jonathan, then move to Tracy until Rebecca. So in your concluding remarks, I would like you to talk about the future of the East African Federation. Yes. What do you think should be put in place so that we can have a peaceful and a good future for the East African Federation?
Right. Okay. Well, thank you again, Fancy. The East African Federation, it has been so much contested by my friend Tracy. And Davis, my good friend, has a different opinion, which I would like to affiliate to. Hopeful, I'm a very hopeful person, and I think that with time, we will have the East African Federation. And what should be done is that, well, first of all, we should unite and then consider to harmonize every problem that we have together and front every advantage that we hold together. Okay. To foster development.
Yes, Tracy.
Thank you.
In a few seconds, we have run out of time.
Okay. First, I would say yes and no. Okay, it has a bright future, but then there's still a lot to be worked on. It is possible to achieve the federation that we anticipate, just like my co-panelists argue. However, I still stand to say that a lot ought to be done. A lot of policies ought to be put in place. Like people, the heads of state have to move away from their own personal interests. They need to come down to the interests of the people.
Okay, Davis?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Like hopefully, I'm one who will always has hope. And the hope for the East African Federation is one that I would pray that it comes to existence. Yeah, that let all those problems, I understand that these different countries have different challenges, but as well to also identify that also these different countries also have strengths. Let us sit down as leaders, everyone who is standing for the benefit of this umbrella work for the benefit of it. Let us find what are the problems. Let the East African Federation, if it is to happen, look at what has been happening, what are the problems that are affecting these different countries, and which solutions can be provided to these countries. If it is about elections, let citizens vote freely, let the social media be open, let everyone vote freely, so that we can front the main objectives and set goals of the East African Federation.
Thank you. Yes, Rebecca.
Thank you. Personally, I would like to be there when the East African Federation is saying, and then I tell my kids where we came from and where we are. So I have hope that there will be the East African Federation, but I still have questions. Who will be the president then? Because that's the main problem we have in East Africa. So I think there is a future, and it's very bright.
Okay, thank you so much. We have come to the end of the talk show. I would like to say thank you to our panelists, Jonathan, Tracy, Davis, and Rebecca from Kampala International University for gracing the inter-university debate today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have come to the end of the discussion. We have been having students of Kampala International University discussing the topic that is the future of the East African Federation. Thank you so much to the viewers for watching. I would like to say thank you to Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV for organizing the inter-university debate, which is a show where university students are able to discuss matters that affect the country and the world at large. From me, I would like to say thank you and bye. See you again next week, same time.